Hi everybody, and welcome to the Voices of Experience Digital Media Project. My name is Christopher Leslie, and I'm one of the directors for Inside Out Support Wales, who are bringing you this fantastic new project. We have got together a series of interviews with people that have got lived experience detailing their journey. We hope you find the interviews as inspirational as we found shooting them. Enjoy.
I was a young offender, ex-young offender, however you want to put it, and now I work with young people at risk of exploitation and youth violence in Nottingham.
And how long did you spend in prison?
18 months.
And what do you do now, and how did you end up in this field?
So my organisation is called Stronger People. It's a community interest company, and we work with young people who are involved in some form in exploitation and in serious youth violence. I started this organisation from scratch. I've got a couple of colleagues that I work with, Joe Fitzpatrick, who's been heavily involved in building it up, and the work that's gone into working with the local authority and building up those relationships and working with youth justice alongside building up all of our relationships with these young people that we have on. The difference in how we work is we work very intensively. So we get a referral in from the Youth Justice Service, and it's not just like, oh, we'll see you once a fortnight. We're talking to them on a almost potentially a daily basis. We're seeing them a couple of times a week. We're setting goals. We're figuring out and looking at every risk factor in your life that's contributing to an increased likelihood of offending, and then we're attacking those things. And we're able to do that because we've got lived experience, but we also work very closely with the social workers, with the youth justice workers, with the schools, in order to identify and then reduce risk. So we've tried to take a very different but necessary approach. It requires a lot more work and a lot more funding, but it makes a difference. And we've made, a significant difference to some of the young people's lives that we work with. We've taken weapons off the street. We've got people into full-time work. We've got people who were not attending school and who were out of town back attending. And I think that it's an approach that we're trying to, we're trying to be able to replicate. We've got myself, we've got one of the team who's a youth psychotherapist, we've got one of the team who's a qualified social worker, and then another person who's qualified in doing the direct work with the young people. And all of us have lived experience. So we've got that blend of lived experience alongside the qualifications. So it's a very different approach, but it's something that we're evidencing in a way that they wouldn't respect if it was just lived experience. So we can go and sit with the academics and say, this is why we're doing what we're doing, this is how we're evidencing it, this is how we're doing safeguarding, this is that, which is not what they necessarily always expect when they see lived experience on the resume. I ended up doing this sort of work because I was involved in that lifestyle myself as a young person. So I've got a lot of experience, a lot of lived experience, but then I've also spent a lot of time learning the professional and the safeguarding aspects of things. So where I try and kind of bridge a gap is between statutory and lived experience. So mixing the two, making sure that there's someone like myself who has real experience, but then who also knows how to work closely with, probation, youth offending service, police sometimes, and schools, things like that.
How do you feel about the work that you're doing now?
I think it's important. It's difficult, very difficult. But I think for me, setting up the business that I run now was a result of getting involved in this sort of work, so volunteering work working with young people, and noticing that there was a gap in service. So it's necessary, it's difficult, but for me it's satisfying, fulfilling.
Okay. How did you end up in this field? So from your release from prison to how you ended up mentoring, what was the sort of journey that took you there?
It was a long, wild journey. It depends how much you want to go into.
Yeah.
Right, so essentially I went into young offenders when I was 17, had my 18th birthday in jail. I got out around 19, and my family moved country, so all of my family, so mum, dad, siblings, moved to New Zealand, so I was living on my own. So I went from being on my own in Wolverhampton in jail to being on my own in Nottingham in a flat. So You think of like a young offender, young violent gang involved offender left to live on their own at 19, I went straight back to what I was doing before. And that was not to say that I didn't try to change. So there was lots of things that led to me being knocked back. And at that point, every time I got knocked back, I went back to what I knew. So long story short, I ended up kind of getting a place at university in Westminster, which is where I was introduced to the Longford Trust. And part of that was going down to moving from Nottingham to Westminster. I studied Arabic and international relations. I was in the Royal Marines Reserves at the time. And then I got a quite serious knee injury, which put an end to that. I dropped out of university. And then I started doing some work with young people. So I started working with doing peer mentoring with young offenders. I ended up going out to New Zealand, doing some work in New Zealand with young people out there as well, and then came back and picked it up and started working for myself here and then working for another company. So I started in schools doing kind of like behaviour mentoring, then I was doing outreach work, and then now I work in a safeguarding role and doing this work with Stronger People, which is my organisation.
Okay. Where would you say in that journey you made the transition? Where would you say it started?
There was probably a number of situations that kind of contributed. It wasn't a single moment, it was like a number of factors. So I knew people who had died in that period of time. I knew people who had gone back to jail for long times. I knew people who had started using drugs. I've been in situations myself where I'd been close to losing my life, and other situations where I could have ended up in jail for a long period of time. I think sometimes you know, well, I now know it's called congruence or being incongruent, which is living in line with your morals. And when you're not doing that, it can feel like you deserve the bad things that happen to you. So I'm not talking about karma, but I'm talking about knowing that what you're doing is either right or wrong. And if you're doing what you know to be right, then things start to go right. And for me, it was like a series of events of things going wrong, and then me changing my behaviours, and then things starting to go right. And it was like a snowball effect to getting me to where I'm at today.
Do you have any examples of a moment like that?
Of what, when things went right or wrong?
So when you were either following the way that you wanted to live and things went right, or an opposite way when you weren't following the way you wanted to live and things went wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question, but I think it's almost hard to put my finger on, in the sense of like, I met so many people along the way when I was doing the right thing. So now my role involves working with like heads of service and people who are in high up positions. I think things going right is, I don't know, it's difficult. It's difficult to say if there was one specific thing or to pick out one specific thing.
What would you say were hurdles in you making the transition?
Definitely people labelling you. So I say I joined the kind of the Royal Marines Reserves. I think a turning point for me was I initially tried to join the Royal Marines, and the man in the office laughed in my face when he got my record sheet. Is he in shot? No. So I went to go and join the Royal Marines not long after I got out, and the man asked to see my criminal record sheet, and when I showed it to him, he laughed at me, he laughed in my face, and I just felt embarrassed, I felt ashamed, and that kind of drove me back. I thought, right, fuck it, I'm not, can I swear in this, or is it, are you cutting it out, or? Okay, yeah. I can reword it, I can, yeah, and so I guess it took a long time for me to prove myself, and people weren't necessarily willing to give me a chance. There was very few people along the way who were like, okay, here's your past, you're presenting as someone very different, so we're going to give you a chance. And eventually I did get that opportunity, but it took a long time to get that. And once I got it, I was like, right, it's same going back to this incongruence. If I mess up now, it will be my own fault if everything goes wrong, and I would deserve it. So it was that sort of thing.
How did you overcome the sort of rejection? So how did you overcome the sort of negative feelings that arose from that?
It was difficult. I think you don't. When I was younger, especially, it affected me quite a lot. So, and it's easier to say looking back that you give up. I didn't think I was a quitter. I thought I was tough. I thought I was, you know, I had kind of everything on lock. But so I thought I had everything on lock, but I was a quitter. So every time something didn't go wrong and I did get knocked back, I would go back to doing what I was doing before. And as a matter of fact, there was a conversation that I had with a friend of mine at the time, and one of the things he said to me was, the roads will always be there. So you might as well go and try these things that you think are never going to work, or these things you're not going to be able to do, because if it doesn't, worst case, you can just go back to it anyway. So the roads will always be there. So yeah, I was trying to go back to that question. I think that it did knock me back quite significantly each time, and it just took for me to mature and to go through enough knockbacks to build resilience, really.
So did you find adequate support for yourself while making your transition, whether that was from sort of outside organisations or probation within service?
Not really, no. Not compared to I know what young people have now. So now the access to services that they have, including services like my own service, did not exist at all. So I actually got early release because I agreed to go to college. So they gave me two options. It was either music or cooking. And I was like, right, I'll do a cooking course. So I had to do 3 months minimum of this cooking course to get early release. So I said, yeah, signed on the line, did 3 months. The next day afterwards, I dropped out. And it wasn't like there was people who was chasing me up to say, you know, where are you, what are you doing? It was just turn up to this yacht meeting or we're going to breach you, basically. So there wasn't much support, but there was also individuals that I knew who gave me, I guess, moral support along the way, and that made a massive difference. I think people believing in you as an individual, as opposed to just organisations who are going to say, here's a grant or here's a course or something like that.
And where would you advise people serving prisoners right now to seek that moral support if they can't from their families or friends?
I think you have to put yourself out there and you have to be doing the right thing. People are not going to take a chance on you based on your past. So you've got to have something to offer. I always say that. Sometimes having something to offer can just be your character. It can be the fact that you are a stand-up person. It can be the relationships that you build. It can be qualifications and things like that as well, which I think why the Longford Trust is so valuable, because you've proved that you've put time into changing. Where can you reach out to get that sort of support? I think it's difficult, but I think being out there and, what's the right word? If you live in that sort of life, I think you will bump into someone eventually, but you've got to be doing the right thing first.
So how would you compare the quality of your life now to the quality of your life prior to you transitioning?
I would say my quality of life now is a lot better. I've got my son here, who's causing havoc in the studio. But that sort of stuff didn't seem real to me when I was younger. So honestly, I lived my life as a young person. I used to think that I was going to be dead by 25. I don't know why I used to think, well, because of the way I was living. And I did feel as if I was living the life. But at the same time, now, knowing what I know now in regards to actual quality of life, which is having a family, having a business, having people respect you as opposed to fear you, I think my quality of life now is 100 times better than it was when I was involved in that sort of lifestyle.
How would you say your transition has impacted your family?
So, when I was younger, looking back on things now, I know that some of the things that drove me towards that sort of behaviour was my family. And I think it's very difficult as a young person to recognise the effect that your offending might have. I'll never forget, as a matter of fact, my example of that was when I got sentenced. And when the judge called out my sentence, I was like, yes, like I thought I was going to get a lot longer. I was being told by my solicitor I was going to get slammed. So when he said for that one offence, and he said 12 months, I was like, yes. And I looked over and saw my mum, and she was crying. And I was like, yeah, I'm still going. And to her, it almost kind of like clicked in a little way in that moment that what was kind of like nothing to me was significant to others. And now that I've got my own son and I'm able to kind of empathise with my mum's situation, and I look at his behaviours, or even working with young people, I build up strong relationships with the young people I work with. And choosing to change my life around has made my mum say to me that she's proud of me. And that's deep. Like the way that hits you when you've been on the opposite side of it is it's important.
Are you proud of yourself today?
So it's funny that you should say that, because I had a moment probably about 2 months ago where I was driving my car and I had my son in the back and his cousin in the back, and I just looked in the rearview mirror and I looked at them and I thought, I don't know why, but in that moment I felt like a sense of pride, and it made me emotional when I was driving, and I'm not, you know, that's not me normally. So, and I think it was just the fact that that I'm living a life now that I never could have imagined myself living before, and it felt safe. So yeah, that was, I would say overall, it's very difficult for me to say, I don't like saying it, but yeah, no, I have had moments recently where I felt proud of myself, yeah.
You don't tell yourself enough how proud you are of yourself.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah.
How much you are achieving. Another question, how much would you say being able to cope with the new digital era has impacted on your transition?
I was all right. When I was coming up, it was MySpace still was the thing. So I am digitally aware, but it evolves and has evolved rapidly. So we've got things that some of the young people that we're working with, some of the apps and the things that they're using, obviously you have to study to get familiar with, especially the ones where they're putting themselves in danger online. But yeah, it's been especially the last year, it's been an interesting transition where all of my work with young people has been face to face, but all of my work with professionals has been through the screen.
Is there any advice you could give? Let's say someone's starting out their sentence or midway through their sentence. What advice could you give to them as someone in your position that you are in now?
You've got time on your hands and you can use it wisely or you can just squander it. And by using it wisely, what I would say is to spend your time thinking about what it is you want to do, why you want to do it, and then formulating a plan about how you're going to go about it. And that needs to be a realistic plan. Like for me, it took me over 10 years. It took me the best part of 15 years to get from where I was at to where I'm at today. And to not let that discourage you. If your plans from the get-go are realistic, if you know it is going to take you 10 years, you don't think, right, I'm going to come out and in 12 months I'm going to have everything on smash in my life. Because some of the people who are your brethren who are coming out, they're going to look like they have got life on smash in 12 months because they've got a new car or they've got other things going for them. But if you know that your plan is a long-term plan that requires that foundation, the sooner you can come to terms with that, I think the better.